All right, this is Patrick Rogers, and today we have the privilege to have Mark Khachaturian on the show, and Mark is the CEO of Wellvii. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark has been the CEO of Wellvii since August of 2022 down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, where he leads the development and commercialization of novel consumer and remote patient monitoring vital sign measurement platforms. Dr. Khachaturian joined Wellvii in October of 2016 as a CTO of Wellvii, where he developed technology focusing on finger-based blood pressure, pre-diabetic, vascular stiffness measurements, and glucose sensors, which are no touch or light touch. And this device is accompanied by Android, iOS apps, and HIPAA GDPR compliant healthcare cloud to IoT platform with EMR connectivity. A lot of things going on there.
Very
This
connected,
platform,
connected platform.
connected platform. This platform will improve the safety, reduce the cost, and increase the accessibility of global wellness and chronic care monitoring in the home and ambulatory settings. So Mark, I definitely look forward to having you kind of dive in, share with us what all that really means, and then really dive into your journey there at Wellvii, and since being CEO here just recently. Before we do that, though, what's one interesting fact about yourself that not many people know?
I played very competitive semi-professional baseball. And that's where I learned a lot of my competitive drive
Right
and
on.
a lot of the skills that, to be honest with you, you really kind of need. I've employed at the CEO level.
Awesome. Very cool. What do you think is the top skill that you took from your semi-pro days that you employ now as a CEO?
Yeah, the top skill is basically accept failure, learn from it, and move on. In baseball, your batting average, if you're doing great, your batting average, is like 350, right?
Right,
And that
right.
means you're only succeeding, you're not even succeeding half the time, right? But you keep at it.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. I love it. Cool. So tell us more about what Wellvii does, and then we'll kind of kick it off with some of your journey.
Well, the whole goal is taking healthcare into the home, Patrick. Current vital sign monitoring technology was developed for hospitals and doctor's office, the arm
Right,
cuff,
right,
these separate disparate devices with long cables.
right.
Our goal was to miniaturize that and make that into one device that's easy to use, that with software and health scores will engage people in their health while still being clinically accurate, right? So you cannot sacrifice the accuracy of the information when you do this miniaturization. So, you look at sort of the iPhone example, right? Did we have digital cameras? Yeah. Did we have cellular phones? Yeah. Did we have, digital microphones? Yeah. But the iPhone and the smartphones really combine that all into one. And that's really what we're trying to do with our vital sign monitoring platform, which is really bridged on the backbone of our key piece of technology, which is blood pressure from the finger. So, there's a lot of other vital signs like your heart rate, your SpO2, which are measured from the tip of your finger. So if you could really do blood pressure from the finger and get rid of that bulky arm cuff, it'll allow you to miniaturize all the devices into one. And then with the current IoT chipsets like Bluetooth chips, cellular chips that are very low cost and very prevalent, you can put those in the device to enable, connected health, and then stream that data from the home into the doctor's office, into the electronic medical health record, to other family members, right? So, I have my mother is suffers from dementia. She's in an assisted living facility, and right now I have no way of getting information from her, right?
Mm,
So I have to rely on caregivers that are busy managing, 50 patients, 100 patients. I'd love to be able to have that data on my phone, and that's some of the motivation behind it, developing this platform.
gotcha. Wow, what a revolutionary product and service. And so not only do people at home, they have the self-education, the not maybe not education, but they get the information themselves, but it also can stream it to
Yeah.
healthcare providers that can make an informed decision. Is there a certain target market that you go for? Is this mainly for elderly? Is it mainly for people with chronic issues or?
Yeah. I mean, you have to, healthcare is so big, Patrick. You have to pick, what's your first
Have a
path.
niche? Yeah.
And that's also, one of the things that, when you first take over as CEO, there's a whole market to conquer. Which pathway are you going to go first? Where are you going to focus your resources? Because guess what? I don't have a 100-man sales team, right? So I have to prioritize and figure out really the biggest market, the biggest bang for the buck, pardon the pun, but really what's the biggest market to go after? And it is the elderly care and the chronic care management, right? So remote monitoring, people that have hypertension, COPD, obesity, these markets where you need to measure vital signs. And then also in these markets, these are reimbursed by Medicare. So in 2019, the United States started reimbursing patients providers, excuse me, a monthly fee to monitor people from home because why? It takes a huge burden off the healthcare system as opposed to going to the emergency room or the doctor's offices when there's a problem. And by doing those measurements more frequently, you get much better data and a much better assessment on their health. So if you measure someone's blood pressure only when they have a problem, once every month or two, if they're chronic and they're going to the hospital, really what's the quality of that? Where they're nervous because they're under stress because they're going to the hospital? I would even ask you, what's your normal blood pressure? What's your normal respiration rate? What's your normal SpO2? You know, I mean, a lot of us don't know that because we don't have we don't take the measurements. And, part of the advantage of our platform is not only using and doing those measurements in a convenient fashion, but if I gave you, if I did, our device does 9 vital signs in 2 minutes. And if I gave you those 9 vital signs, could you interpret them?
Mm.
Probably not. A lot of people can't. I have a hard time because it's a lot of information, but we calculate based on those vital sign data is your health score. So in other words, over time, if you combine all those and you look at how things are changing, kind of what's your overall picture of your health, right? And that's applicable for everyone. But really the primary path, just to emphasize, is the elderly and the chronic care management.
Gotcha. Love it. So, so when we kind of dig in, right, what do you think are some of the things, as your journey as CEO and even before that, perhaps, that has allowed you to be successful in your role?
Yeah, I mean, there's there's a lot of components to running a business. I mean, you do need the technical background, you need the expertise. I did my doctorate at MIT in medical physics to really understand, how does light interact with the body. Also learn about physiology and such there. And then there's the people side, right? You got to build a team. You got to pick the right people. I can't do everything, and even if I could do everything, I wouldn't do it as well. You know, so how do you build a team? I always use the expression at Wellvii, what's our batting order? You know, who who do I need? You need certain people to do certain things at certain times, and who are those people? And we're a smaller organization, so there are gaps, right? There are skills that we need to fill, but one thing I learned is that the technology, you need the technology background, you need the right engineers, but you also need the right product vision, the right people to go out and get feedback from a customer. And it's not just one person, or some people that have a sales focus will build a great sales team but not have strong engineering. You're only as strong as your weakest link, is what is some of the lessons I learned in the past. And what the challenge is that as you build that team, when I took over in August of 22,
Yeah.
I can't fill every role at the same time. I don't have the money for that, right? I can't, so based on where I'm at in the company, what are the key roles? What's your critical path? You got to fill those gaps as you have money, and as you find the right people too. Filling the gap with someone who's not the right fit. It's like putting someone, to be a leadoff hitter who's, a number 4 hitter. It doesn't work.
Right. Right. How did you make that decisions, right? That this is the critical path. How did you determine the critical path? That this is the first person I need to hire. This is the second.
It's a great question. The critical path really is determined by either generating revenue or getting funding, right? Those are the things. 90% of startups fail, Patrick, because they don't have money, right? And the reason that you don't have money is because you're not either generating revenue from the product, or you're not picking the right, investments to generate interest from potential suitors and investors. So, the first thing was, okay, let's get our FDA clearance. That's a critical path because that's a barrier to the market. We already have approval, by the way, in Europe. So I started business development in Europe, right? Because that'll generate revenue. And that's responsible for some of our revenue. And then of course the FDA clearance enables and opens a US market. So it's all about picking the path to really generate revenue or investment. And then also understanding, translating that to what features, what's the minimum features the product has. I like to put, so many more features in our application, but does the user really need those right? You
Mm,
gotta, you gotta pick, the typical canonical MVP. What's the minimum viable product?
yeah, yeah. And how big is your team now?
Right now, we're up to 12,
12
right?
people.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we've got a strong core of engineering. We've got a very strong board of advisor member, Stephen Klasko, Dr. Klasko, former president of Jefferson Health. And
Okay.
then we have Uwe Deigel out of Europe. And we have, putting the right, people that have healthcare experience. We want to keep this a clinical company. I don't want to turn this into too retail-y, because then you're competing with, first of all, behemoths, and also the clinical validity of our data is a real differentiator. And we want to focus on that clinical market.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you guys are at 2.5 million now. You got 12 people. What's next, and what's your strategy for go forward, and where do you think you're going to be?
Yeah, I mean, the plan for 2024 is to really complete the commercialization, or kick off the completion of the commercialization in Europe. So start driving revenue. We get our FDA clearance. We should have that in about a month, right? So then we kick off. We do launch our product in the United States in March at HIMSS. So big product launch there. We just signed about a month ago a licensing deal with our thermometer. So we'll be selling that thermometer with one of the largest manufacturers of thermometers globally. So it's commercialization, right? So we've gotten over the humps of, oh, does, get, clinical validation on the products and all that kind of stuff. Now let's commercialize it and pick the key channels that will generate the most revenue. Like, retail right now is not a look for us. Why? Because you need millions to market there. And the millions right now would be better going to further develop the products. And then with much more limited resources, you can do quite a bit in the B2B market.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So then it's kind of focusing, going more towards B2B. So what's the strategy to do that? What's the, if we dive into thinking about specifics, like how do you as a CEO kind of steer that ship in that direction, and how do you drive that growth from a B2B standpoint?
Yeah, with in the B2B market, really, there's the primary ways to get relationships are really through this is where investment banks come in. So we work with Oberon Securities out of New York, with a lot of strategic relationships with large healthcare providers and organizations trying to get their feet wet in health. I also, in my background, I worked at General Electric and GE Healthcare. I have relationships with hospitals and such. And then you have to pick the right advisors who have the key relationships. I mean, healthcare is, you're asking a, a big ask. You're asking to, for providers to use your equipment to care for people. That's not a small ask. That's not like saying, oh, you know, buy our bubble gum off the shelf. This is like, we are asking you to put, the safety of your patients in our hands, with vital signs, with respect to vital signs now. So you have to
Yeah.
pick the right people. And then you have to go through, the B2B play in healthcare is a longer process. Pardon me, it's about 6 to 9 months, right? It's get devices there, test it, prove it works. Then you get into the pricing and then the distribution discussion. So, it's a marathon, but I've had experience in this space, and then you pick the other people with the right experience. And besides the investment bank, there are some really critical conferences where the B2B folks meet, and then you just got to go meet them, shake hands, and really get them interested in your product.
Gotcha. Yeah. So one of the things we had asked about was, what's the biggest failure you learned from as a CEO? And you said the most important decision is what people you surround yourself with. So it sounds like there's some maybe some learning stories there and experiences.
Yeah, pardon me. Yeah, the biggest really mistake that I can say for myself that I've made is it's not that I've really picked the wrong people. It's not picking enough people.
Oh,
In other
okay.
words, you see what I mean? In other words, I've through years, I've good experience picking people. I always meet them. I've actually many years ago, I made a really bad decision because I actually didn't physically meet someone. That's important to me. That personal relationship, that face-to-face thing. I think we've resolved a lot of it nowadays since, COVID with Zoom and Teams. But, I tried to do, in the past, we tried to fill a lot of the gaps with engineers where you really needed regulatory strategists and operational strategists, people that are familiar with contract manufacturing. So really not, looking at that broad portfolio of people that you need to run a medical device business. And we just, we tried to do it internally, sort of like build it from the ground up when, we were recreating the wheel a lot of the times. Why not hire someone that's got 25 years of experience as a consultant? You don't need to hire someone full time, but who's an expert, you know?
Yeah. So it was more so yeah, it's more so getting the right people. Yeah, and
And
not
realizing
not enough.
the diverse background of the people. So, having someone with regulatory experience with the FDA in blood pressure,
Right.
that's essential. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
problem, you know.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. So let me ask this question. I always ask this question. You filled out an interesting answer, but if you're going to hire a CEO to take the reins for your company, what's the one book you'd require he should read? You actually said no book can ever teach you about yourself. Tell me more about that answer.
Yeah, I had a very good mentor earlier in my career when I was at ABT Molecular Imaging. I worked under a gentleman, Peter Kingma, and he taught me the business is personal, right? It's not, there's no formula, Patrick, that you or I can go read because that
Oh,
formula doesn't take into account who we are,
sure.
right? There's many ways to make Wellvii successful. The way that Mark Khachaturian is going to make it successful and the people I pick would be different than you. But you, in theory, could do it in your own way, right? So to look for a formula, I mean, of course, I read things. I do, I watch like LinkedIn. I watch the speeches from Steve Jobs and Bill Gates from the past. Some of the challenges they've gone through. I'm not saying I know everything, but translating just kind of the general common sense principles of business to yourself, that's very personal, and it's not going to be in any book. My mentor said the most important things are never written.
Mm, love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Uh, Well, Mark, it was great having you on the show. A lot of, just overall great lessons learned and great nuggets there. If any of our listeners want to reach out and get a hold of you for any follow-up questions, or perhaps there's a medical professional that wants to incorporate and utilize Wellvii, what would be the best way they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, just go to our website. You can fill out a form. It'll email us, or you can just find me on LinkedIn.
Cool. And for those who are not visually seeing your background, what is your website?
www.wellvii.com.
Awesome.
And then,
Cool. And well, great. So again, thanks for being on the show, man. This was awesome.
it was a real pleasure, Patrick.
Yeah. And for the listeners out there, please hit the like and subscribe button and help us spread the word about what we're doing on the show. We're helping the next generation of leaders and CEOs be that much more successful. With that, this is your host, Patrick Rogers, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.